Hello everyone, thank you for joining us at this news hour on Equinoxe television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Bable Jonathan. In our top stories in this edition of the news, the rights of human rights defenders seriously threatened in the crisis-hit southwest and northwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon, and they have stood up to say enough is enough. It is time to put an end to the continuous and increasing violations and abuse of the rights of human rights defenders and other citizens in the war-torn situation in the northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon. Also in this newscast, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia denies that there is hunger in the war-torn Tigray region. Stay with us. Human rights defenders in the crisis-stricken northwest and southwest regions of the Republic of Cameroon are decrying the increasing violation and abuse of their rights, notably by government authorities. They have said that they are receiving more increasing threats as a result of their struggle to ensure that the rights of citizens are respected or simply are not violated by whosoever, including government authorities. And they met in the southwest region of Chieftown Boya to discuss issues connected to their work and their struggle for the respect of human rights in the country and the threat they have been receiving. Details with Derek Jato in Boya.
Even the rights of human rights defenders are in the balance as the armed conflict ranges on in Anglophone Cameroon.
We have a lot of cases where people who have to defend human rights are being arrested, like journalists. We had a clear case of Samuel Wazizi, who died in military detention in Communicado. We have a lot of cases. We have a colleague, we have Barrister Enoben and Barrister Bono and Barrister Tunde. They were arrested and locked up in Tiko. You have other cases of lawyers who are being intimidated, a level of going to defend their clients.
And Barrister Eno Benjamin, the Cameroon Bar representative in the southwest region, point at where the problem is coming.
Our judiciary is not independent, and if we work hard and carry out some reforms to do our reform our judiciary, to turn the judiciary from an authority into a power.
And today the Movement for Democracy, Development for Transparency, MDDT, Cameroon, has brought together major players involved in the fight against human rights violation and law enforcement officers.
Today's gathering is actually a roundtable workshop with the legal department, that is magistrates, and then we also have here present judicial officers and investigators, and then we have the Batonese representative and other seasoned lawyers that are here present for us to discuss freedom of expression and their role as in the promotion of human rights and the protection of human rights defenders.
Being duty conscious in line with the laws in place can make the society better. Justice Lebon Mofo Chibili, Advocate General at the Southwest Court of Appeal, remarked at the end of the conference.
We all have different roles. Even though we have different roles, our different roles are supposed to complement one another. And at the end of the day, we must be able to know where to draw the line.
Platforms like this one are rare, and it is hoped that MDDT Cameroon will organize such platforms in order to rescue human rights, which is observed as increasingly being eroded in Cameroon.
And we stay with you, Derek Jato, in the southwest region to talk about projects that are not executed, not just because of the unstable socio-political and security situation, but also because of other factors and irregularities identified in the award of contracts in the southwest region of the country. Details with you, Derek.
The award of contracts based only on project ideas has landed the Southwest region into problems, as such projects are hardly realized.
In fact, before 2018, most projects were project ideas, and so in the course of execution, it experienced a lot of difficulties. As a result, some projects were abandoned, some were partially executed, and these caused a lot of headaches to the disadvantage of the beneficiary population.
It is against this backdrop that the Southwest Regional Delegation of Economy, Planning and Regional Development convened a meeting in Boya with the various stakeholders of the region on how to better implement the Prime Ministerial decree of maturation of project.
The Prime Minister came out with a Prime Ministerial decree instituting this meeting, a meeting that has to do with the maturation of projects. Yes. When we talk of a project being mature, in a nutshell, you need to get to the field where the project is supposed to take place, come out with a cost estimate, come out with the feasibility studies, come out with the environmental impact studies, come out with the drawings that have to do with the project, and of course come out with the tender documents. These are all elements that will make that project mature.
And these municipal authorities, while saluting the initiative, also call on the Cameroon government to sit up.
One of the biggest recommendations from all mayors, or from most mayors, is that the government should tell us exactly what they will be sending to us. That is each ministry. We have the case of Mindever. We are sure that every year Mindever sends us 100 million. And with that amount, we can then plan what projects to use for that amount.
And the insecurity on the ground too should be taken into consideration.
The insecurity on the ground is, so much so that it tends to limit a lot of project maturation and project execution. Another reason is finance. We have a lot of constraints. The councils are facing so much financial constraint as at right now.
It is therefore expected that in 2022 many projects will be realized in the region based on this maturation approach.
Several persons have been rendered homeless in the Mbende 49 Steps neighborhood in Limbe, southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. The house was reduced into ashes by wild flames in that part of the country, and the flames engulfed the building, reducing everything to nothing, and more than 30 persons have been rendered homeless by that fire incident in Bende quarters in the Limbe. At least 10 rooms in the 2 compounds were destroyed by wild flames whose origin isn't known as of now. The youths of the Mbende neighborhood served as fire rescue soldiers in that incident. They struggled to no avail to put out the flames, and it is alleged that each of the rooms contained at least 10 internally displaced persons who have now been rendered homeless, and their living conditions further worsened. And of course, the inhabitants are now calling on the Limbe City Council, the Limbe City Council mayor, to start making use of the firefighting brigade they recently created in that part of the southwest region of the country. And the internally displaced persons and other victims of that fire incident, and now lamenting and sending distress calls to local and administrative authorities to rescue them from that situation. Now, up in the far north region of the country, parents with sickle cell children in the far north region are calling on government authorities to intervene and save lives from that health problem. Many of the children suffering as a result of the fact that they are sickle cell anemic are not receiving adequate medical attention, and the parents are sending distress calls to the Yaoundé administration to help them and rescue the lives of their children. We shall be coming back to that in subsequent news editions. At least 9 alleged drug traffickers traffickers and consumers have been arrested by elements of the Mobile Intervention Police Unit in the Bonanjo, Douala, in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala, and the 9 were arrested during an operation that took place at the Ngwele neighborhood in Bonaberi, Douala 4 subdivision. And security and defense forces have been intensifying the fight against illegal activities, notably drug trafficking, as well as other crimes within the city of Douala and elsewhere in the country. But these illegal practices, these illegal businesses have been prospering in recent times, and the security forces have been struggling to stem the ills in the Cameroonian society. We shall also be coming back to this report in a subsequent news editions. Time for us to talk about some Christians of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon and Christians of the PCC Nitop Mankon, that is in the northwest region of the country, interrupted service yesterday. The Christians of PCC Nitop were against the transfer of the pastor who was recently appointed, and weeks later she was to leave the church. And of course, the Christians interrupted the church service yesterday, and they marched to the Presbyterian secretary, the Presbytery secretary, to put their worries through, to express their grievances. The pastor later promised to put across their grievances. The Presbyterian secretary promised to put across their grievances to the hierarchy of the church, notably the moderator, Right Reverend Funky Samuel Foba. Now we take you to news out of the Republic of Cameroon, and we're talking about the Tigray province, the situation in the Tigray province of Ethiopia, a region hit by crisis for quite a long time now. And the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has denied that there is hunger in the country's war-torn Tigray region. Speaking at a polling station on the day of the country's general election, Mr. Abiy admitted there was a problem, but said the government could fix it. The fighting, which the United Nations says has left 5 million people in need of food aid, is now in its 8th month, and more than 350,000 of them are living in famine conditions in Tigray, according to the recent United Nations-backed estimate. And of course, last week, the United Nations humanitarian chief Mark Lowcock told a closed session of the Security Council that there was famine in Tigray. He also said that starvation was being used as a weapon of war by troops from neighboring Eritrea, who are fighting alongside Ethiopian forces in Tigray. Eritrea has denied the accusations, and the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said Ethiopia will not push the Eritreans out, but was working with them to finalize issues peacefully. Right, we come back home to this report concerning children suffering from sickle cell anemia in the far north region of the Republic, and parents are sending distress calls to the Yaoundé administration to rescue their children from the sufferings from ill health as a result of sickle cell anemia. Innocent as has more.
Parents in the far north region of Cameroon says his pockets and bank accounts have been rendered empty by a sickle cell his child suffers from. I face a lot of challenges to take care of my child. At times, I cannot sleep when the child cries due to intense pains. Honestly, a sickle cell case ruins the family.
Vous avez peut-être un lot d'argent, ça finit.
A medic confirms this.
La prise en charge n'est pas facile, elle est difficile.
Lives of these sickle cell patients are threatened more by the COVID-19 pandemic since they are one of the most vulnerable groups of persons.
Plus compliqué pour les drépanocytaires.
I advise families with a sickle cell case to ensure their patients are vaccinated for an additional protection.
Donc, les enfants doivent se vacciner.
Health experts say care is available but costly to the families.
La prise en charge est chère.
With anemia, transfusion is needed, which is very costly.
Et une transfusion coûte cher.
It is because of this that associations of medical experts met to sensitize the government and the Cameroonians on needs to consider the severity of this illness.
Ils écoutent aussi.
Government authorities should give us a listening ear to understand what the medical associations do and to lower cost of the produce in order to permit families of sickle cell patients overcome this challenge.
Vraiment, nous exhortons beaucoup plus, n'est-ce pas, l'État du Cameroun à mieux comprendre ce problème.
Their principal problem faced is lack of a program or specialized centers to take care of sickle cell patients.
Mais dans d'autres pays,
specialized centers should be created to cater for the patients, like the case in other countries.
Dans notre pays,
en tant que parents, nous demandons qu'il y ait quand même la prise en charge par le gouvernement.
Parents also implore government's intervention for proper care of their sickle cell children.
And that's it for the first part of this newscast. Talking Point is up next. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us in Talking Points. Today, we are receiving a journalist and political analyst, member of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party. Tayon Elvis, you're welcome.
Thanks very much, Babila Jonathan. It's my pleasure being here today, of course. It's quite a sad moment when we get the killings around the country. We feel very much concerned. But I think that with Professor Maurice Kamto and the members of the party, we keep on insisting that the war in these two regions must come to an end.
It must come to an end. In the meantime, 6 divisional delegates abducted by armed men in the southwest region's Indian division. One of them killed. The other 5, their whereabouts remains unknown to the general public as of now. They are still in captivity. What's your analysis of the fact that 6 persons, 6 government workers are kidnapped once at the same time, and for several days 5 of them have been in captivity, while the other was killed, the divisional delegate of the Ministry of Economic Planning and Regional Development?
Well, I think that if I look at the analysis, it's so occurred, really unfortunate that the senior divisional officer from Nigerian division was not on seat from what we've gotten on the ground. That is Mr. Foran Lawrence, because he's a level-headed, I see him as more of a level-headed administrator, in which if he was on seat, I'm sure he would have taken precautions, because many have been asking the question, how could
he was on official... Yes. Permission,
on official permission,
for health reasons,
yes, for health reasons,
in
correct.
the nation's capital, Yaoundé.
Yeah, you're right. So many are asking the question, but how could it be that 6 of these kind of officials, high profile, that's including one divisional chief of land surveys, could be involved in such a thing, and then, you know, without any security cover? And I begin to ask the question that, as I said, that's why you see me lament that if the senior divisional officer was on board, I don't think we would have had that scenario. But then in administration, we know that we have first and second assistant senior divisional officers. Now the question we are finding out, because it's still unclear, is for those who were on the ground, now, like the first assistant divisional officer and the second or so, how did it occur? What was the communication between these 6 government officials and the senior divisional authorities over there at that time, where they could move from there? And you know, I've been to Ndian, of course, I told you I was there earlier in May, and realized that the stretch of road between Mundemba and Equinoxe is very rough. I tell you, it's a large stretch of road, made of mostly forest area, where we usually have most of the guys along the line. Now, the main issue we're asking the question is, you know, it's difficult to understand, because if they leave from there to come for a land demarcation for a multicultural, that's a multi-company. We talk about Enio, for example, as we got,
though we don't know if it was for the demarcation for the Equinoxe per se, but from the unconfirmed side, they were going to carry on demarcation for a new site for Equinoxe. But now in the Equinoxe TT, the question we're asking is whether they were going for demarcation of Equinoxe or any other official site assignment. The question now is, how did they leave without being assigned to be accompanied by security forces? Now we understand that in administration, if you are leaving, probably like the first or second assistant could maybe give instructions for the security to accompany you, and then when you are getting into another area of jurisdiction, we talk about the subdivisional area of jurisdiction. Under normal conditions, the GO for Equinoxe was supposed to also receive them, probably with his own we call it état major, as they call it in French, and security forces. Remember, we have a military base in Equinoxe, just as we have a military base in Mundemba. Now, the question we ask, which we are still to understand, is how did they get here, getting right into Equinoxe, where the GO in Equinoxe did not receive them, nor did not also accord security officers to follow them to the site where they were carrying out the exercise of demarcation. So it is $1 million question, but I think that there is more to that. I will still be on the ground several times to get that fact, to see exactly why, because it's abnormal. I repeat, it's abnormal. If you come to Douala, where we are, you remember that even in normal land demarcations, even in Bonaberi, you always discover that since as land issues are complex, sometimes you see when the officials are going out, they go out at least a gendarme officer or a police officer. But now the question is, how does it occur in a volatile area, which we know very well, and these officials move? Because we don't yet have indications whether there was we don't have indications whether there was we had security forces accompanying them, but we only got that they were taken. So it looks like they were taken just like flies, and then carted away or taken right into the bushes. The question now is, what happened with the security lapses that we had on the ground? It's something that we have to find out and get to the crux of the matter.
And in a difficult security environment like the two English-speaking regions of the country, especially areas that are far away from the urban centers, it's difficult to understand this, how government officials, knowing that to an extent they are prime targets of some of the armed men, can be moving around, moving in that number, at the same time, without security and defense forces going with them. It's really difficult to understand.
Jonathan, very difficult to understand. That's why you see we are saying that from the way the events occurred, or the incidents rather occurred, which is an unfortunate one, we are still to get to the crux of the matter, because the main thing as we get is that if you go over land demarcation, as I said earlier, normally there are parameters, there are procedures. Now we have some questions. Did these delegates move to the office of the first or the second senior of the first or second assistant senior division officer in Jan division? That's the first thing we ask. And if they went there, what was the response for the first and the second assistant senior divisional officer? Now, if they went there, another point we're asking is, within the delegates themselves, did they weigh it to see that it was very convenient for them to leave from Mundemba to Equinoxe without being accompanied by military? It's $1 million question. As I said earlier, we will also be finding out the GO of Equinoxe, was he aware that these 5 divisional delegates and 1 divisional chief of survey, they were coming on a mission into his own area of jurisdiction? If he was coming, now what parameters, if he knew, for example, the next question is, what parameter did he put in place to ensure that as they are entering Equinoxe, they are being received even by him, and then also accompanied by military to the site before where the unfortunate incident took place? These are the $1 million questions. And as I said earlier, it is an unfortunate situation because we are still talking, we don't yet know the fate of the others who are still in captivity. But then our main issue here is that it is an indication that all is not well, because we understand that the crisis looks like it's taking another phase. Now, things like this, Njan has been cool for a long period of time. I must admit that. I've gone to Njan several times, even though I go all the way through Idi now, and they say the road between Kumba and Mundemba and even Equinoxe is not very certain when you are moving on that stretch of road. Now, the question now is, if Njan has been calm for some time, we'll be asking several questions. What has happened that all of a sudden we see insecurity coming up in Njan, in Equinoxe? We had even the issues of the oil mills that took place, the
were destroyed, and private oil mills that were destroyed.
Private oil mills that were equally destroyed, all the like. So we realized that, and we know that another military vehicle was intercepted around the bushes somewhere in Equinoxe. We just saw the images and all the like. So start asking, if insecurity is coming back in Equinoxe, and also Indian, what could be the issue? Could we have invisible hands behind, or it is just that probably the boys sees in the bush, or the boys in the bushes rather, are seemingly coming back? So we need to be finding out, because it's very technical to analyze. I must admit to Babila, because since that incident occurred, we have been trying to look at the balance aspect of what transpired and how possible could it be under this atmosphere of insecurity in these two regions. It is still very difficult to understand, but I think that I'll be getting to the officials that be to find out exactly. But then my worrying aspect is the manner in which the media also handles the situation. You know, we're talking about an issue that can be linked to the genocide in Rwanda. We talk about Radio Mille Collines, that will equally play another role. Of course, we call it Radio Television Libre de Mille Collines. They call it RTLM. Now, if you look at it critically, I look at another media organ newspapers. We have Kanguba, that was also part of those newspapers that were equally indicted for inciting violence. You start asking, but how do you look at it that we are reporting a situation in Indian, and then media organs take up, which is right to report and right to verify facts, but they tell you that non-indigens or non-Indian youths, you see the caption where it comes. Now, I said earlier, without fear or favor, that under these normal conditions of reporting, in a state where we're talking about unity, national unity and integration, I think that the National Communication Council is supposed to assist us in this direction, to tell us whether we are on track to carry on this kind of reporting, putting in place this kind of titles we find, or if it was sponsored, we don't know. But we think that it's very worrisome, because we are we are at a critical situation here. Now, if you get those kind of reports telling about non-Jan youth, non-indigens, it tells you that we are inciting hate speech, and this is what we think that the Musonga Commission has been fighting against. So I think, in real terms, without fear or favor, that if the powers that be, I think that the president, who is a veteran journalist, Mr. Joe Kalabose, is supposed to call on those medias. Now, where is the litmus test, Babila?
But the issue is about facts and getting the facts right.
Yeah.
If the people who masterminded the abduction or the kidnapping were actually people who were not indigenes of the Indian division, indigenes of Mundemba, and so on, indigenes of all those areas, will it be a problem to say that those who masterminded the issue, the problem came from outside?
It will be Babila, because we are living at a situation whereby we first of all had xenophobic movements in Fako division. You get the point. And now, if we are talking about national unity, if you identify these persons, because it looks like the journalists have identified them, the first thing I get from the country means that the journalists know the killers. They know their identities. They know these ones surely are not from Indian, or they are from somewhere else. So if they know, the first is that they should help the security forces. That's why I've been saying here that if they have a proof, which is they have to keep it for themselves, but the authorities that be are supposed to call on them, work with these guys so they identify the abductors and tell us more about the story. Because if you say non-indigens or non-Jan youths, we think that you will be promoting hate speech. Come to think of it, Mr. Babila, what if you say that kind of, you give that kind of scenario, and then the next minute, maybe an Aroko guy storms an area of probably a non-indigen? Do you know the kind of result we will record here? So I think that hate speech is already dictated in the whole issue. There is no justification. If we were saying that we are supposed to condemn the killing. Now the government and the powers that be are supposed to probe into to find out their identities, and they are the ones who are better placed to know how to handle the identities of those who are involved, and not a journalist who comes and tells you that non-indigens, non-Indian youth. I have relatives Indian, I have relatives in Equinoxe. Now, how do you put that kind of scenario? It means that if it has to be taken seriously, you'll be putting me at loggerhead with those guys, with probably the guys who originate from those areas. I think it's an error in the reporting that needs to be put into order by the National Communication Council. The litmus test, Babila, is simple. If the government and National Communication Council does not put order in these papers to get to them, so they help us get the killers who are non-indigens of Njan, or they give us other facts to the government to work on it, it means that the government is an accomplice. That's the litmus test. And if National Communication Council does not act, I've given them a litmus test as well, it means that they too are condemning by promoting hate speech. I am still waiting for the commission to comment on that.
Another problem is the fact that what happened, the kidnapping of those government workers, is being attribute it to a manipulation to destabilize the efforts of the Prime Minister, who is from that part of the country?
Well, I would not want to dive into that. Why am I saying so? Lives are at stake. Now, I realize that we are taking the crisis and making money out of it. We take the crisis and we play politics out of it. It doesn't work like that, Mr. Babila. You can imagine that we had a bloody weekend from north to the southwest. And I think that those who are talking about jeopardizing the work of the Prime Minister, it's not yet time to get into that. They should see into who are those responsible. Of course, the papers that reported show that they know the killers. Then they should get to the papers to help us identify the killers. The main thing is we have other people who are still under captivity. Their release is paramount, Mr. Babila. If they don't ensure their release, at the same time saying that it's a way to destabilize the area where the Prime Minister comes from, I still see it as a political ping-pong game. And that's why I said that we are taking many things for granted. Blood has been spilled. Blood continues to flow. We need not put politics in this issue. That's why I said that journalists are supposed to stay off the track of propagating hate speech, so that the powers that be get down to work and make sure that how do we end this crisis? How do we release the others who are still in captivity? Is most important. And how do we secure any others who could be adopted in the days ahead? It is paramount. It is very paramount.
5 of them are still in captivity. Do you understand, or can you explain the reason why government officials can be in captivity for several days, and they are not yet being released?
Well, you know, it's a complex issue. Probably if we have the spokesman of the Ambazonian fighters or of the fighters who are concerned, I'm sure they are well placed to understand exactly why they are keeping the delegates. We know we only get feedback from the voice notes that are sent out and some of the videos that are coming out, but we cannot exactly ascertain why they are keeping them. But I think that
the question goes, it's about the authority of the state.
Yep.
Because we've been hearing the authorities saying the state is in control, the government, the authorities are in control of the situation. But how can you be in control of a situation and your officials, government officials, are kept in captivity for several days?
Yes, that's why I said earlier, Babila, that the officials and the powers that be in Yaoundé have allowed politics to take precedence in this current quagmire that we find ourselves. Just imagine that people are in captivity and you're already getting other versions saying they want to destabilize the area of the Prime Minister. Does that make sense? This is what we call witchcraft in broad daylight. Because the most important aspect we're talking here is that, first, Yaoundé should acknowledge that it's not going well. And that's why you see us talking all the time with CRM saying that no to the war in these two regions. This is a cry we started long ago. It's not because we like it. Now, when you get political prisoners who are advocating for the war to come to an end in these regions and you put them in prison and you keep judging them and adjourning the case over and over, how do you look at it? Whereas those who are accused of having embezzled COVID-19 funds are still there, removing a tell us presumption of innocence for COVID-19 funds, embezzlers, and you say for those who stood on the way to say no to the war in the Northwest Southwest, and they are currently languishing in jail. How do we explain that? So in a nutshell, Mr. Babila, we must be honest to call a spade a spade. The government, from these indications on the ground, should know that they are far from resolving the Anglophone crisis. And we think that we'll keep on putting pressure for the government to yield, because if these delegates are adopted, tomorrow it could be you, tomorrow it could be me, it could be any other person. So how do we look at it? Must we see people we keep losing people on the ground every day because the government is giving another fake story that everything is under control? Nothing is under control from what transpired over the weekend. Things are still getting worse, Mr. Babila, and I think that Yaoundé should listen very well and take their responsibility, because they will account for it. I told you earlier, the media organs, Colin, we have newspaper Kanguba, they were all brought for trial. The owner of Kanguba, Mr. Hassan, took 42 years in jail as his jail term. The others were doing Colin, 3 of them got life imprisonment and the other peanuts. It tells you that what we are doing here, as we keep deceiving the people that all is well, we will answer these charges not long from now.
We'll answer the charges not long from now. In the meantime, there is, while some of the government officials are in captivity, there is a stiff battle against secessionist or non-state armed groups in the northwest region of the country, precisely in the area which is referred to there as the epicenter of the crisis in the northwest region. I'm talking about the Bui division, and people have been dying, people have been killed, both soldiers, civilians, and it continues like that.
Well, it's so sad. I saw the graphic images from Bamali. I saw what happened on the ground. It's so sad that the government still keeps playing a ping-pong game. I got the governor of the Northwest region and the president of the regional council who went to Yaoundé, and they had a loan agreement, 106 billion, to tell the Bamida River, no, Mr. Babila, they are giving the president all as well. They need to sit back, think, because all is not moving. Look at the blood that was spilled. Look at the young military guys who were killed in cold blood. Do we sit and fold our arms and we continue to pretend that activities are going on? Mr. Babila, Yaoundé has expired, and I think that if they are not doing the right thing, they will answer not long from now in the due courts of law.
Thanks very much, Tayon Elvis, journalist, political analyst, member of the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, CRM political party. Thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure being here, and I hope that the government listens and ensures that this war comes to an end.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today. Equinoxe is up next.